Hey there, boys, girls, and flying squirrels. My name's Joe Keyport, and you're listening to the Ear Coffee Podcast. For our second to last episode of the decade, I caught up with Andy Angstrom of Fragile Canyons to talk about their new record, Here It Is. During the episode, we talked about Andy's focus on the lyrics while he wrote this record, donating the proceeds to local charities, and imposter syndrome, and also memes. I'm also sure that Ear Coffee has reached peak podcast voice with this episode. Either way, it's Andy Angstrom of Fragile Canyons on the Ear Coffee Podcast. So I'm talking to Andy Angstrom of Fragile Canyons. Andy, how's it going this morning?
Very good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Even though it's kind of a joke that your band is named other things, I always get nervous that anytime I see it, that I'm like, did I type it wrong? Did I say it wrong somewhere?
Yeah, a regular problem.
Yeah. So let's just start off with the history, your history with music, and then how kind of Fragile Canyons came together. So let's just start there.
Yeah. So I've been playing my music my whole life. I started kind of seriously playing in bands like sophomore year of college. Okay. So I had some buddies that were starting a band when I was a sophomore. There's a band called The Further Adjustments.
Okay.
And so I was playing bass with them. So I basically played bass with like a bunch of different bands for probably up until the age, like some 28. So like that was until probably 4 years ago.
Okay.
I played bass with like 5 or 6 different bands. So I kind of just like bounced around the Twin Cities. Like got to like get through all the venues, like kind of do a couple different bands. And then kind of like in that amount of time was writing a lot of my own music, and never really like had the time or like figured out like how to have my own avenue for like writing it and playing it. And I wrote some songs for like the bands I was in, but it's very like select.
Okay.
And most of them, like the stuff I was writing didn't really fit with any of the bands I was playing in. So eventually like I had basically 3 of the bands I was in like were all on a break at the same time. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to like go record all these songs and just like get them out and like just figure out what I'm going to do from there. So me and my friend Joe Copel, who's a local musician too, so he recorded, we basically just like, I just overdubbed everything on our first record, which was The Golden Door. That came out like 3 years ago. And so that was just sort of like, I'm just going to try to write my own songs, do my own thing. So I did that, put out a second EP that was all just like solo stuff, just like finger picking instrumental stuff. And then from there, that was like, okay, I want to like try to create a band and like do this a little bit more like with people and playing out and like make it more collaborative versus just me doing my own thing. And so then like Chase joined, Noah, and then Joe, who recorded the first album, was our first guitarist. And basically tried to like make all of the songs full band songs, and like none of it really worked. It just like wasn't quite jiving. So then we just ended up kind of jamming and like doing our own thing. And then it kind of took like a whole different direction. So that was like our third album, or I guess my third album was where it started becoming more of like a kind of jammy indie rock thing versus more of like a folky, like acoustic thing.
Gotcha. You said that the songs you were writing were much different than the bands you're playing in. What kind of bands did you play in? Like what type was like punk bands, or what was kind of the vibe there?
Yeah, it was a lot of like roots rock stuff.
Okay.
So like Further Adjustments, there's a band called Whitetail, which was this guy Joe Copel that was he was writing most of the music for that. So most of those bands were like Neil Young, sort of like Deer Tick sort of thing. Some of it, like I was doing one band that was kind of more of electronic music. This band called Cool Pollution. I was playing with these 2 brothers, Ryan and David Holweiger. That was kind of more like country rock. So it was a lot of like more country rock singer-songwriter stuff, which was sort of similar, but my stuff, like what I was writing, especially when I started, like I was listening to a lot of Nick Drake and Van Morrison, and kind of more like floaty, ethereal sort of stuff, and not as much like backbeat rockin'. And I think what I really liked too was, especially once we started the full band, I wasn't didn't really have a lot of bands where there was like a lot of improvisation. And like, so that was, as we were starting the full band, like really got honed in on like jamming and kind of like making the songs a little different every night. And that was something like, it didn't really have an avenue for doing that before at all.
Gotcha.
They were all pretty like, you know, kind of standard songs.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I wonder with like, especially when you mentioned kind of jammy and more, is that something you almost work on when you rehearse as like a band then? Because I mean, I grew up, playing like a jazz band in high school and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So like, obviously you kind of practice how to do that, but where does that kind of come from then?
I think where it came from, like really like when we sort of started the band, I think we had a couple of like groups that were very like, we all listened to super different music, but then I think it was like Neil Young, especially like the Crazy Horse, like jammy stuff, Grateful Dead, Joni Mitchell. A lot of her live stuff is like, because she had a bunch of like jazz people backing her up, so like some of that stuff I just like, that's like some of my favorite music. Van Morrison, like Astral Weeks was like almost all improvised. So I think we just were like, really quickly, that was something that we wanted to aim towards. So how we kind of would rehearse it, but I think it was really like in the live setting, like right off the bat, just like starting the set with like, we're just going to make something up for like 30 seconds or like a minute, or like just do something to kind of like loosen the gears a little bit.
Yeah.
We've kind of moved a little bit away from that. Like I think we still do it here and there, but I think really like as we've sort of progressed, it's become much more of like a tighter sound versus like kind of, there's probably less improvisation and more like, it's just become much more like groove oriented and rock. And we don't, like, I think before our sets used to be like 50 minutes and now we don't play more than like 30 minutes. So it's very like boom, boom, boom.
Is that the shorter set time? Is that out of necessity of where you're being booked, or is that like just a kind of your own choice?
I think it was kind of our own choice because like I think we could play like upwards of an hour if we wanted to.
Yeah.
And so I think what we used to do is kind of have like improvisation like worked in there. And I think for me, like especially when I saw like a lot of local bands, like I really like to see 30 minutes of like really good concise music. And I think when we were doing the 45-minute sets, we'd have like a couple of them where it's like, all right, that was kind of a clunker. Or like, and I think with a lot of shows, it's like you're on a bill with 3 or 4 other bands. And so it's like, okay, like these people don't have that much patience for like music all night. So like, let's hit them with 30 minutes of like the best stuff we got.
Gotcha.
Versus like 45 minutes of like trying to fit too much in there. So that, I'd say there's certain shows, like it kind of depends on the venue. Like this summer we had a couple of shows where we're playing like 3 sets. And so we're doing like 3 hours maybe, and then it's like you have to you have to fill the time somehow. But so it kind of depends on where we're playing. Like we'll kind of like fit it based on where we're at.
Gotcha.
But if it's like a Friday night at the 3 through 1, it's like we're doing 30 minutes. There's not a whole lot of jamming. Like it's gonna be like super concise and tight. Yeah.
You said you played bass in a lot of bands. What was it like stepping over from more of a, because like bassists aren't like just that, not like unseen as a bassist myself, but like you're rarely out front. So like, what was it like stepping into a role where you're a band leader, and because you play guitar as well? So like what was that like, and how did you kind of change how you did stuff in order to make that work better? Because obviously it's different. It's new.
I think for me, like the biggest change was just like the amount of like vulnerability there is. And I think everyone that like, I think if you're a drummer or a bass player, like you should just try to like write a song and like bring that, because it is like the gigs become way more intense when you're booking it, you're like showing something to people that's like about you or about something you think, like you're leading the band. So it was really hard. I'd say for the first year, like I didn't really know what I was doing, because you think you know guitar, but like you don't really know how to play, because like bass is like I knew like how to lock down, but I think it's so different when like you're backing it up, because you don't like have that level of vulnerability unless you've been there. So I do remember like as a bass player in the band, like being like way more like critical of the songs and like kind of being like, it's a gig, like whatever. And then as you transition into like the songwriter and leader, it's like, damn, this is like really intense. And so it's good like empathy building. And I think doing that, like, it's been fun because I've still been able to play bass here and there. And I feel like I am a much better player, like a better supporter now than I was. But it's really different.
Gotcha. Yeah. So how quickly after starting Fragile Canyons did you decide you were going to start donating proceeds to charities? Because most of your albums, if not all of them, are donated. And then I thought I read somewhere also gig money is also... Is that something you do too?
Yeah, so we do all of the merch and then all of the records.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So all that, and then pretty much all of the proceeds. So we'll save up, at this point, we save up most of the gig money to like pay for the record. So like once we know that we've got enough cash to like pay for the record, then we'll like donate the rest of it.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of like all the proceeds from everything, I guess. But yeah, so I did that like right away with the first one. And I think for me, like I started Fragile Canyons when I was 24. So I've been working for a couple years, and I think I knew like I don't want to do music as a full-time job. Like I want it to be kind of this separate like thing that I'm really passionate about, but I don't ever want to make money for. Like I want it to be like a very pure thing for me that I don't rely on my income for.
Gotcha.
And I want to like make my money somewhere else so that like music is a very like pure place where I can kind of like, I don't have to worry about promoting or having it be liked by people or like having really big, like I can just do it as something that like is fulfilling to me.
Yeah. Do you feel driven to perform and play music, kind of that?
Yeah. Like I do it, like I get very, like I'm really driven for it for like the purposes of like the art side of it. Like I like playing shows, but like I don't really like playing shows that like I don't want to do. Like I want it to be like a space where I can like make art and like do something that like I'm not super into like being an entertainer with it, or
gotcha.
like I don't know, like I don't like going and like rocking people's face off. Like I want it to like, I want there to be some kind of message or something for people to get into. But with the charity thing, I think for me it was like, okay, this is for people that listen to it or support it or come to a show. Like they're not going to be like, I don't want them to, if I know that I don't want this to be my career, like why should people care about this? Like, because I think for some people it's like, oh, like this is your full-time job. Like I'm going to make sure that I like buy as much of your stuff. And I was like, well, I know that I want to do that. So the charity thing was really just for me to feel like this isn't people like showing up and just watching me dick around. It's like whether or not you like the music or enjoy it, or like, then at least you feel like, okay, I'm here and like my money is going towards like something good. And like whether you like it or not, like hopefully you like it. But if you don't, it's like, okay, well, whatever, it's going to a good cause.
Yeah, is that kind of like an imposter syndrome thing, just because you are on bills with bands who are trying to make it their career, and you're like, well, I want to justify
exactly
why I'm in this space.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like I don't want to feel like I don't want to feel like people would assume that like I don't give a shit about it. It's like I want people to think like I do care. Like I want there to like be as much commerce from it as possible in order to support good organizations. And like then I can like let go of the having to worry about like, you know, am I making enough money from this or not? And like, am I paying my bills? And I can just like completely leave that aside and just focus on making like as good of music as possible, playing the right gigs, like not having to accept every gig that comes across, like only picking the ones that we really want to do. So that was like kind of the intention with it. And like all the band guys were super on board with it. Like all of them have full-time jobs too. So the nice thing is like we kind of just were able to all sort of like gather around the purpose of it. And I think what could be hard with like previous bands I was in is that you might have one person that's like, this is my thing, I want to tour, I want to like go, and then a bunch of people are like, well, I'm a teacher, or like I have a full-time job, or like I do this, like, so there would be kind of that disconnect. So the nice thing is like it just like gets everyone like, this is what we're doing, this is the intention. And I don't think like because because I think everyone like they want to play gigs, make music. Like I don't think we've ever not felt driven to do it, which is good. Like I think everyone's passionate enough about it that like no one would be doing it for the money.
Yeah.
Which is nice. Like people are into it because it's like, let's do the best thing we can. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then how do you pick your charities? Because they're always a little smaller than, they're not just like the big one kind of in the news. What is there like a vetting process, or is there something that you go through to like figure out where you want this money to go to?
Yeah, I use there's this online tool called Charity Navigator.
Okay,
and so you can filter on like where the charity is located, how big it is, and then it'll show you like how much of their funds like go directly to their thing versus like administrative versus promotion. So like what I try to do is pick someone that's local and I think it's like usually they're less than like 3 million in total budget, which is kind of like the threshold typically on that site. So I try to find small ones that are local that I just like appreciate what they're doing. And so like we have, I think the first one was like Beacon Housing. We've done Immigrant Law Center is the most recent one. Like, and most of them have been typically like local and small. And the nice thing is like we're not like a behemoth. Like we raise like a decent amount of money, but we're never going to be raising like multiple thousands of dollars. So the nice thing is it's like, okay, like $100 here and there is like going to be impactful versus, if you give it to some like gigantic organization, it's going to be a drop in the bucket. They're not really going to notice it. Where like the nice thing is you can see like the local impact, which is I really like.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you put out Here It Is a month ago about how many records is that? So you said like 5 with Fragile Canyons?
That's the 5th one.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is it like putting out releases on such a consistent level like that? Because that's almost insane a little bit. Because are you just always writing, or what's it like making sure you get that release out in late fall, early winter?
Yeah, well, it was funny because like when we were finishing this one, we realized that we were at Radio K the exact same day 2 years ago.
Oh, really?
Our release show was the exact, like it was like we've almost like gotten it down to a science where it's like we record in the summer, finish it early fall, like promote it late fall, and then like early December, late November. But so we've done 5. I'm like I write like in a very like set amount of time. So like typically I will write from like late December to like January.
Gotcha.
And that'll basically like I'll almost write everything in that span of time. Like we may have stuff that like will sort of sprinkle in throughout the year. But I think for me, like my goal was that we would play a show once a month and make an album once a year.
Okay.
And that's just like been my goal since the first day. And that's the nice thing is like everyone else is kind of driven for that. So like the guys too are like, when are we going to record? Like when are we going to do this? Like when we got new tunes? So like I feel like we've kind of gotten it down to like a good speed, which is nice. And I think it just keeps it consistent.
Yeah.
The nice thing is I never want people to like come to our show and feel like they have seen the exact same thing like a year. So that's where it's like, I want it to be every time like something different. So the goal was once a year. I would say like how we do it. I mean, it's very like scrappy. Like I think we've made every album in like typically about under like $1,000 total.
Wow.
So, and like we'll basically play the songs for like almost a year live. So I'll write them in like December, January, and then we kind of will like figure it out in a live setting. So like we'll practice it, but then sort of like work it live
Gotcha.
like, for each one of our gigs. And then usually by the time like July comes around, they're kind of like fleshed out good songs, or like we feel like, okay, this is like strong. Because then once we get to the studio, it's all live track. And we usually will do it in like 2 days. And the nice thing is like, to me, like the record, I want to spend like as little time in the studio as possible. Because it's like, I just want to like capture that energy quickly.
Okay.
So we almost always record like very, very fast, which I think it's worked well because it's just like by the time that comes around, we're just like, okay, like let's get them out. And then like release it. But then we're always in this weird phase where typically like we'll put a record out and then it's kind of like I think we've got a show next month and it'll be like all new.
Okay.
It'll all be new stuff. So like it's kind of a weird, like people will hear it and then come to the show and be like, oh, are you like not playing it? And like, well, we'll play like a couple, but it's like we've been playing this now for almost a year.
Yeah.
So a lot of our fans, by the time they hear the record, it's like, oh, great. Like here's all the songs I've heard live for a year.
Gotcha. So you primarily write all the songs, or how does that kind of work? And
I write everything, and then we will kind of like work it out as a band for like developing the groove, like figuring out the structure. But like the lyrics, basically like the lyrics and the chords I write.
Gotcha.
And then we kind of like will put together everything else as a band.
Gotcha. Because I was wondering, because your last record, Under the Silver Dome, or Slow Dancing Beyond the Silver Dome. Wow.
It's a weird title to word, but
it begins with a 7-minute track, The Shade. Was that one that like it expanded as you were jamming it out, or was that something you almost wrote as like the long kind of 7-minute track it was?
I think that so The Shade, that one in the studio was basically done in like one take. Like we knew that it was like this has to be as like live as possible. That one, it's been really interesting because like as the band has progressed, we've had like 3 different guitarists. So like each guitarist has kind of like changed the direction of the band a little bit, which has been really fun. So on Slow Dancing Beyond Silverdome, that was the first album we did with our guitarist Nick.
Okay.
And so really like when Nick came in, I think for me, like he was like the perfect piece to sort of open up like the Grateful Dead jammy aspect of the band, which was something that I probably wasn't ready to write those songs yet. And then once he joined and like the way he played, it was like, okay, now we can play like these kind of songs. Like it just feels like this is going to fit really well.
Yeah.
And so that song was basically like, this is like the Nick song. It was like, it's like, here's like, we are introducing Nick, and like that one was the most different from the last record. So that one, I think that one too is just, it was like, let's do something that's really loose. All the songs on the last album were like pretty tight and structured.
Yeah.
We had this one song called Television Sky that like people really were like, I really like the way you guys play that. So The Shade was sort of like, can we sort of tap into that but do it a little differently?
Okay.
Yeah.
So is that why you placed it right away at the front of the album then, or?
Yeah, like so Jeff Tweedy one time in an interview said like with a new record, the first song should be like the most different from the last one.
Okay.
So that's every time we put something out, I'm always like the first one should be the one that is like, okay, this is definitely different. Like this is like a totally different thing than the last one. So with Slow Dancing Beyond Silverdome, it was like The Shade doesn't sound like anything we've done before, and it's like it really showcases Nick. So like let's put that right away.
Yeah.
And then with the new one, Here It Is was like, okay, this is as different as the last one of like all these songs. So like let's start with that.
Yeah.
So that's always been kind of the goal, is like for people that listen to the new one, they know, okay, like this is a totally different band or like different record, different style. Like just so then like right off the bat, you feel like you're into something different.
And since you mentioned Here It Is, the perfect transition, I was listening to your Radio K Off the Record interview a couple of days ago, and you mentioned that this Here It Is the first record you spent the most time on lyrics.
Yeah.
What kind of prompted that in wanting to spend more time on kind of the words and what you're saying?
For me, I got really into, like, over the last year, I was listening to a lot of like late 70s, early 80s post-punk. So like the Minutemen, The Fall, XTC, The Clash. And I think what those bands did really well is like they wrote songs about like the world and politics and things going on, but like they did it in not like a really overt and like ham-fisted kind of way, where like to me, like political music was like Rock Against Bush or like Green Day or stuff where it's like it's almost like excessively like okay, I know what you think, what you're talking like. There's not a lot of like mystery to it, and I thought like with a band like XTC, they could talk about politics in such a loose and observational and like funny way, but like not like overtly preachy or anything. So that was like listening to those bands, it was like, oh, I can write about these things I care about, but like not sound like too preachy and like here's what you should think kind of way.
You're not gonna get the eye roll, like
yeah.
It's like Rage Against the Machine's fun to listen to every once in a while, but you're like,
yeah,
like,
right,
yeah.
It's like it's cool, but it's almost like there's no like interpretation to it. It's just like I know that like this is about this moment in the Zapatista movement, like So so there was that. Plus, I think like with the last, I was just trying to think like what can we do different? Like what haven't we done before? And I think how I was as a writer before is like the lyrics were sort of a way to like just fill out the song and like fit a melody. And I think there wasn't like enough focus for me on like make sure that you're saying something. It was kind of just like make sure the song works and the lyrics sort of make sense.
Yeah.
And like it gets you somewhere. But like, so this one I spent way more on it because like I want every song to have some sort of firm meaning to me, and like I want there to be some kind of like resonance there.
Gotcha. I mean, I noticed in the show, or not the show notes, the liner notes on the Bandcamp. This was, I think, one of the first records I saw where you broke down kind of what each track was about.
Yeah.
I didn't really see that in the past ones I clicked through.
Yeah. So the reason I did that is because like a lot of times what will happen with me is like I'll write about something that like makes a lot of sense to me, but I won't be super specific about it. So sometimes people will just be like, I don't know what this song is about. So like one example of that was we had our album Adapting to the Cosmos. There was a song called Mount Diablo, which was this song about like it's funny how we write, because our drummer, when we wrote that song, our drummer was wearing a San Jose Sharks shirt, and like we recorded on my phone on a voice memo, and I just like named the song San Jose, just to like, okay, I'm just gonna name it something for now. And I was just like Googling the Wikipedia page for San Jose, and there's like the first indigenous population there had this like myth that like their tribe at the end of the world, like all of the ice caps would melt, the world would flood, and there would just be like this small amount of land on this mountain called Mount Diablo where they would all like live, and there would only be like 100 people left about. So like I wrote this song completely about that.
Yeah.
But like no one is gonna know. Like, no one knows about. So like that was one where I was like I write that and people would be like, yeah, what's that song about? And I tell them that and they're like, oh wow, that's super interesting. Like I've never heard of that. Though. It's like, okay, maybe like I should help people a little bit, like give them a little bit, because there's like the song Balanced Meal on the new one is like that, where like it's very clearly to me about a theme, but it's not super specific. So for me it's just like, hey, in case you're wondering, like this is what this is about, or like, but it could be about whatever you want. But this is sort of like, here is my goal of writing that.
Gotcha. It's kind of because I was surprised to see you. It was like, what, I can't remember which track it was.
Yeah,
it was Full of Light, where you're like, this is my attempt to write something that I could imagine Tony Bennett singing.
Yeah, and
I was like, I don't remember the last time I heard Tony Bennett's name, but I was like, Fragile Canyon's Tony Bennett crossover, kind of like Lady Gaga.
Yeah, yeah, that was like, it's funny how we will like come up, because that song, I had written everything else on the record, and we had a bunch of like really heavy songs, and our drummer was like, we need just like something light. We need like a ballad. So that one I was like, okay, what kind of ballads do I like? And there's this album that's Tony Bennett and Bill Evans playing together, and it's like one of my favorite albums ever. But that was sort of like, I was trying to do something like a very classic sounding ballad, like something that sounds like from, it's like the 40s or 50s. Or, it doesn't sound like that at all, but that was like what I was like aiming for.
Gotcha. Yeah. I do want to ask about the single, the self-titled single, the one that shares the same name as the album. Here It Is, because it's very interesting. Where did that kind of come from in the story behind that one? Just because it felt very beat writing to me. It's just it's almost one long run-on sentence with just kind of swirly guitars and stuff. So tell me about that one.
Yeah, so that one, I'm trying to remember kind of the origin of it. So really, like, what I wrote that one when I was writing the record, I was reading a lot of like Zen Buddhist books, and so like Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind was a big one. Phil Jackson, the basketball coach, kind of wrote a book about it called 11 Rings. And like, essentially like what a lot of the message was of it is like, you're not like, there's no purpose to like trying to be like a good person or a bad person, but there is purpose to like being aware of like who you are, like how you pay your bills, what you do, like are you like self-accepting and okay with how you live your life, and like be aware of that, and like not try so hard in your life to like try to put yourself on a pedestal, or like think about some sort of like moral high ground of one person versus the other.
Yeah.
And I think it was too like, this is going to sound like so corny, but I think a lot of, I think like social media applications, like they clearly make ad revenue by making people like mad at each other.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
it's like every time you like turn on, it's like, I was reading today about people like fighting about if Adam Driver is like sexy or not. It's like, this is not, it's like, why are we talking about
This
like,
is not a productive conversation.
yeah. And so it's like, I think a lot of times people like think about the world as like, we could do all these things if it wasn't for like these people, or like we like, if I could like, if this political party like would do this and we do it, but like until then, like there's nothing I can do. And there was this like thing that was in Zen Mind Beginner's Mind where it's like imagine the world and everyone in it as like one body or one hand. Like don't think of everything so separately. Like think of everything as like completely intertwined. So like you can't like hate something that you feel that you're actually a part of.
Yeah.
Like, and so that was sort of like accept your contribution role, like how you are a person in the world, and don't think of it as like someone else needs to fix something like that. So that was sort of like basically saying the whole purpose of the song was like, get off your pedestal and like accept that you're probably just as crappy of a person as everybody else. And that's okay. But like, just be aware of it and accept that.
Gotcha.
So that was sort of, and that one was like the first one I wrote for the new one, where it was like, I wanted that one to be like, I want to say something very clearly, like, and strongly as much as possible.
Yeah.
And something that's not like floaty. I want it to be pretty like direct.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of where that came from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was wondering, because now that you said that, I was like, I'm always nervous when I add my own kind of interpretation of stuff when I write about music. I was like, oh, consumerism and like that stuff. And I was like, so how far off was I in that kind of idea?
No, you were right on.
Okay,
so
cool.
there's this book by Jane Mayer called Dark Money that I was reading a lot of. And like, so a lot of it came from that as well, which is like essentially like a whole book about like super PACs and like all the money behind just like basically everything. Like how much of like just the construct of our world is like this vast, complicated network of money.
Yeah.
And so that was like the chorus of where does your money come from? It's like, think like who's paying your bills? Like, where do you live? Like, think about like how deep down all of this goes.
Yeah.
And because of that being like, you're probably not any better than anyone. Like, we're probably all like part of some completely like fucked structure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like, just like chill out a little bit and like accept that like, hey, we're all kind of like part of this extremely twisted horrible thing.
Well, because I was just like, because I think right as I was listening to the song, I was thinking about just like trying to spend ethically, and you're like, when you realize the brand that you're like, oh, this is great, but it's also owned by a company that definitely has issues with child labor,
Right.
and you're like,
Right.
oh, how do we do this kind of thing?
Right.
Gotcha.
And it's almost impossible. Like it's very, it's like, it's almost impossible to say like, I will live a morally ethical life. Like there's just so many, every single thing you do has like so many webs to it that like, I don't think anyone's truly clean, you know?
Yeah.
So that was kind of what that one was about.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming then that you talk about once you get the record out, you're already starting to write. Have you started writing the next one then, or?
Yeah. So we have like 6 new ones right now. So we're I mean, we just started like kind of fleshing them out. I would say like with the new one, we're kind of in that stage of like, what are we going to do differently? So I don't know. We'll see. I mean, we're like, I'd really like to do something that's like more electronics and then a little bit more like poppy.
Okay.
But I'm trying to figure out like, there's stuff that I really like of pop music that I think is like done super well. I'm trying to kind of like tap into that a little bit. Like I think Maggie Rogers is really good. Like I think there's just like some pop musicians that like do it super well. So I'm trying to like, I've been listening to a lot of like top 40 hits and trying to figure out like how the hell do you like do this?
That,
and like, so I'm trying to like kind of tap into that and aim for that. And then it's sort of like, I mean, it's funny because we kind of aim for something.
Yeah.
Like with this new one, I was like, I want to sound like XTC and the Minutemen. And we make it and everyone's like, oh, you guys sound like Semisonic, which is totally fine. Like, I love Semisonic, but like, so I know that we'll like kind of aim for something and then we'll kind of like hit somewhere in the area.
Yeah. Weirdly, this kind of reminds me when we were driving to my friend Wes and I, who also runs Ear Coffee. We were driving to this wedding and we were talking about the new Harry Styles record and how he quoted that Bowie quote, like, stand just beyond where you think you're able, like, creatively stand. And then so you always kind of come back a little bit anyway.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I think like Bowie does that really well. I think the 1975 does that pretty well, where like, I feel like they aim, like when you listen to their interviews, it's like, they will aim to be like Blue Nile and they'll hit like Sting, which is fine. Like, but it's, I feel like you kind of have to like push yourself more because you're never going to like hit it.
That. Yeah.
And I think for me, like what the goal was, cause it was like 3 records in a row, people were like, oh, this reminds me of Real Estate. And it's like, okay, like I like Real Estate. But it's like, I need to firmly not sound like Real Estate. Yeah. So like, that was like on Here It Is. Like, I'm just going to like scream on this song. Cause it's like, I don't think Real Estate would do that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to sound like that at all.
Do you find that since the band only plays like 12, 15 times a year, you're also trying to be different enough with each thing that you're not like rehashing or sounding stale? I know you mentioned like you want someone when they see you again, you want something to feel new and different. Is that kind of part of that drive too? Yeah.
I would say like each show we're trying to like one sort of figure out like where are we playing, who are we playing with, like what is going to work well there, and then each time kind of like what are we going to try a little different.
Gotcha.
I think the nice thing is like the other guys like really hold me accountable as a writer too. So like if I write something that sounds really derivative of something we've done before, like they'll all kind of say like, I don't really want to do that because like, it sounds exactly like this old song, or like it sounds like something we've done before.
Yeah.
So we will like throw out like half the songs that I bring in, which is fine. Like, so I'll bring in probably 12 and then we'll kind of like solidify probably 5 to 6 of them. Yeah.
Do you find as a creator, you take criticism well? Because I know at times I'm like, I take criticism well, and I'm like, well, no, you're wrong. You're very wrong. So do you?
I trust the group. So I think like, if one member says they like really like something and then the other ones don't, like I think it's pretty clear if something is like working or not. And I've never felt like I have to like push the rock up the hill.
Yeah. Like
even with all the new ones, we had to play really differently, but I think like it wasn't, we all knew what we were trying to do. So like it wasn't too hard. And I do think like Noah, Chase, Nick, like they listen to everything.
Yeah.
So I never worry that they're like trying to ever pigeonhole us into anything, because they are into like every type of music. Same with me. So like they'll really push me to say, you know, either like this song isn't working, or like this hook needs to be something different, or saying like Chase or with those guys, it's like we need a ballad, or we need like something that does this, and like it kind of helps me almost get like a homework assignment or something. Then it's like, okay, now I have something to like aim for versus just like trying whatever.
Gotcha. Yeah. And is that something you had to learn how to do as you're moving in from kind of a supportive role in bass to more of a band leader than two, or?
Totally. Yeah. I would say like I learned a lot about like how to make a song work. Like I think before, like I kind of like, especially when I played bass, like I thought about a song as just like a bunch of parts, and like how do you make all the parts sort of fit together.
Yeah.
And then as a writer, it's like way more of like establish the groove, say something, like keep it tight and don't complicate it. And I think like that was the hardest thing for me of like taking criticism and learning, is that before, like I would think about so many ideas to just like cram into something, and instead of just like trust the people, trust the groove. Like if someone is like critiquing a song, like trust it and like hear them out and like try to figure it out. And I think for us, it's like we try to kind of hone in on like, we try not to like get too complicated with the details, because like the songs aren't all that they're not all that complex just from like a parts standpoint. But I I would say I take criticism okay. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe the other guys would disagree.
Agree.
Like I don't know. Like we are so clear with our goal. I feel like that there's not a lot of like discussion of like because it's like, okay, we're going to play a show a month. We're going to donate everything to charity. We're going to put out a record a year. And like most of the guys are pretty open. So yeah, I don't really feel like we're ever like off track of like, we might be like, do we want to play the show? Do we not want to play the show? Like we might talk about like very specific things, but when it comes to just like, I feel like everyone holds the music making part above all the other stuff, which is like super important. And like most of it, like those guys will all play. Noah makes our t-shirts. Like they'll each do something, but then like in terms of like booking, running the social media, like I kind of do all that. And those guys are like, just do whatever you want. I don't care. Like they kind of let me go, like take it and run with it. Yeah.
So that kind of mentioning the social media and handling that stuff, that kind of moves away from the serious questions into the thing that everybody asks about, which is the memes.
Yeah.
I don't want to hit on it too far just because you definitely have talked about it a bunch. And I feel like at this point you can ask somebody about Fragile Canyons, like, oh yeah, I saw this thing on Twitter more than I heard the song.
Right.
So when did like that, where did that come from? And you don't always think of that as something a band does, even though it's becoming more and more kind of pervasive among kind of groups, just because they want that continual interaction. Yeah. So where did that start for you?
Yeah, it like for me when we started the band, or like when I started like back as a solo act and then kind of transitioning into a band, like I was like super serious on social media. So like I will talk about like the songwriting process, and I'm going to talk about like only the gigs, and then talk about the album over and over. And like, and it was just like, no one really cared. And it's just like, I don't know, if people want to hear the music, they'll hear the music. Yeah. So it's like, I don't think someone like scrolling through their Twitter or Instagram, like needs to hear about your music all the time. Like, and I think for me, what was like really interesting was like for folks like Riley Walker, Phoebe Bridgers, Wolf Eyes, like they all run their social media as just like a stream of like whatever the hell they feel like. Yeah. And then there'll be like, hey, by the way, we have a show. Sure. By the way, there's this. But like they'll kind of just like post memes, they'll post pictures. Like it'll just be like kind of their stream of their life. And I find that like so much more interesting.
Absolutely.
Versus just like hearing about like, oh, your show. Like, yeah. And I just like there wasn't like enough to really talk about. It's like, okay, we have a show, we got an album, like not really sure what else to tell you. Like go listen to it here. Yeah. The meme thing was pretty much like I did this, like the Breakfast Club one just like exploded. And then it was like all of a sudden all these people, like we had like a bunch of Bandcamp downloads from it. Like we're getting interviewed by like the newspaper. Like it all of a sudden opened up all these doors where it's like, okay, maybe we need to like open the horizons a little, like not be so serious, like make like the social media, like building that network like more fun and engaging versus just telling people about our own stuff all the time.
Gotcha. But I have a question. What's your deal with the Ice House? Because like,
so I think what's been broadly like what has been cool about a lot of like the social media stuff is like being in a band it's really fun, and then it like sucks. Like there's things like you get like rejected by gigs. There's like sound guys that don't show up or on drugs. Like promoters don't pull through. Bands like act like dicks all the time. So like there's just stuff where there's so many of those things where like I think so many people in the music scene are like going through similar stuff. So I always felt like starting to kind of make fun of it. Like all of a sudden all these bands were like, oh yeah, like that venue never emails me back. Or like, oh yeah, like this sound guy is horrible. Or like that kind of stuff. The joke with the Ice House is like right when I started Fragile Canyons, I could not book a gig for like 6 months. No, I couldn't get a gig anywhere, like any night of the week. And I was emailing all these places. And like the first time I emailed the Ice House, I was like, hey, like I'm looking for a date in like 3 months, any day. And they were like, we're booked. And I was like, what about the next month? They're like, we're also booked. And like pretty much since then, like I've just never been able to get a gig or anything. Like I've been asked to join bills there, but like I've never been able to like get a gig.
Gotcha.
And that has happened with a lot of other people. So then it just became this like joke. Because all these people were like, oh yeah, they won't email me back either. So it became like sort of a spoof. I haven't tried to book there in like years.
Gotcha.
So it's been a long, like it kind of like the joke started like right when I started the band because it was like, hey, like, but like the lowest point was there was like Delano's Pizza used to have bands.
Okay.
And they like sent me a multi-paragraph rejection. Like it was like the guy told me, he's like, I listened to your first 2 albums. Like, I think that your music is more fit for like a massage parlor or like maybe a yoga studio. I don't really think it's like for Delano. And like, I don't know if you ever saw music there. It's not open anymore.
I don't know.
The stage is like the size of this table and like no one ever went. It's like, but he was like, I just got this like such a thorough rejection. And so like the first year of the band was just like fighting for any kind of gig. Like just like pathetically begging like the Acadia for shows. Just like any bar. It's just like, I just want to play like somewhere. And so like all those venue jokes just came out of like, I think so many bands have gone through that where it's just like, I've been rejected so many times. I can't get a show anywhere. Like, so it kind of became like a joke. And each venue in town, like everyone makes fun of like the Kitty Cat Club poll or like Ice House shows don't start until midnight or like there's all that kind of So it kind of became like more of a like, let's make some content for the local musician, like something that we can all kind of like laugh at a little bit. So that was my deal with the Ice House. And I don't know. There was like, I just had a lot of like mixed experiences with them. And I mean, like, I'm sure they're nice people. Like, it's fine. But I do think it's like fine to make fun of them. And every local musician also like likes it. So it's like maybe like, I don't know. Maybe you guys should like treat people a little bit better.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Gotcha. Because it's just how I've always been so surprised with how hyper focused a lot of the like the subject matter is. Cause, like everything from like you mentioned the Kitty Cat Club poll to like things like that. How much time do you spend then like working on like these things? Do you have just like a big long draft list of just ideas? Or?
I am very ADD. So like I'll be like riding the bus and I'll just like think of something. So like it'll be, or like something will like come up and then all of a sudden I'll be like, okay, I want to like make a joke about this. So usually I will either do it on the toilet at work and I think people think that like I use like the Instagram story for the most part where you just like put text on it. So they each take 15 to 20 seconds. They do not take very, like, I don't know how Photoshop works. Like, I have no idea how to edit anything. It's all just like the most rudimentary photo stuff. So like when I think of the joke, it's like it takes me about 5 seconds. And I feel like whenever I like work on a meme for like a long time or think too hard about it, it like never is funny. Like it has to be like, okay, I thought of something, like I'm just gonna go post it. Yeah. And it's like, I mean, it's such like low like it's like you could just toss out anything. It's like the internet, so it's like I can send out like 30 memes and like no one's gonna like get annoyed by like people are just like whatever, I'm just gonna like scroll through it like if I don't think it's funny. But they are like, I always felt like the more specific, like the more people it's funny. So it's like I try to like make it like insanely specific, but then like my coworkers and family that don't play in the local music scene, like most of it goes completely over their head.
Gotcha. Yeah. Gotcha. Well, to just kind of wrap things up, what does 2020 look like for Fragile Canyons and just kind of that stuff?
Yeah, so I think we'll put out another record sometime in the year. We're playing at Big Turn Music Festival in Red Wing in February. So we're really excited about that. We've never played a music festival, so that'll be fun. And I've heard that one's really good. I haven't been able to go, but I've heard it's like really well run.
Nice.
So we'll do that. I think we're going to try to do a big show probably at like the 7th Street in March. We're working on it right now. But then after that, probably like we'd like to get some big like summer shows. Like hopefully at this point, I've been doing this for a couple years. It'd be cool to like get on a block party or something. So we'll see. But like do some like cool summer gigs, but kind of just like keep on the path. We've got another music video coming out. I think next week it should be done. So yeah, I think we'll do a couple more videos for this record and then kind of just start working on the next one.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe.
The Ear Coffee Podcast is a companion to the blog of the same name. If you like this episode, please leave us a rate and review so we can stand out among the other music podcasts. You and follow us at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram @EarCoffee. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.